All right, thank you everyone for coming along today. Sorry, we're starting a couple of minutes late. Okay, so welcome. My name's Ian Bailey, and I lead all of the research that we do around HR at CognitionX. And so what we're going to be doing today is just walking you through a little bit some of the recent research we've done, kind of helping you understand what it is that we're doing at CognitionX beyond this wonderful event that you're at. Then my colleague Megan will talk you through some of the research we did last month around coaching and just kind of very quickly take you through some of the findings that we had on that. And then we're very lucky, we've got Adrian here, who's the CEO of Sidekick, and he'll be giving you some insights into his platform and how they're approaching the topic of coaching and how AI can kind of help kind of disrupt that particular use case. So that's what we're going through today, and then we'll have some time for Q&A at the end as well. Okay, so let's get started. So the first thing I wanted to just kind of highlight is, first of all, please do connect with us, find us. Our email addresses, Twitter handles, things like that are on the screen here. But also, as of tomorrow, we're releasing a new report that we've been working on around the impact of AI on HR. And so there's a short link for it there, bit.ly/HR primer. Encourage you all to go in, just register your email address, that's all that's needed. And we'll send that out to you as soon as it's available tomorrow. And then as part of that, what you'll also get is a free 1-month trial to our Pro Research subscription. So that URL is going to be at the bottom of the screen as we go through the presentation, but please check that out and subscribe. Okay. So first of all, a little bit about CognitionX. Our goal is really to be the advice platform for everything AI, and specifically, obviously, what we're focusing on is HR. But as we start to go deep in HR, we're also now going deep in chatbots, which was the session that was on just before this. And then we're starting to move into other verticals, other industries, where we'll be continuing to build that out. And so part of what you see over the last couple of days is some of the work that we're doing, across the board around all things AI. But specifically, what we're going to focus on today is the research that we're doing around HR, and then some of the smaller events, not quite as big as this one, that we're running from an HR perspective as well. The other thing that I just want to highlight to you before we get into that is some of you I know will have already logged into the new directory product that we've got in alpha mode. The link for that is on the screen as well, which is just directory.cognitionx.com. And what that is that's an index of over 300 HR AI tools that are out there. And so the idea really with that is that we help you to navigate this incredibly complex marketplace that's out there at the moment around what is the right tool that I need for my particular problem or my particular use case. And so you can go in there, you can sort by things like candidate sourcing, employee engagement, whatever it might be. You can search and find specific companies, and you can start to explore and understand some of the different case studies that are in there as well for each of those vendors. Now, what we also just released last week is this expert network. So when you go in and register for the directory, it will ask you if you want to be an expert. If you feel there's a particular area around technology and HR that you're an expert in, and you can register as an expert. And so what that means is that then as that grows and our expert network grows, as HR professionals and then over time, kind of any professional goes into the site, then you can self-serve information from the directory, but you can also ask a question, and it will get triaged out to the expert network. And so you can get almost real-time support on some of your questions and issues around this topic. So check out all of that. This is basically how we're structured from a research perspective. So you can see there are several things that are free that I've just talked about. The directory, the expert network, and then within the directory, there's also a news feed that you can subscribe to. There'll be articles that automatically go in there, and then you can register to receive those via email, via a newsletter as well. And so all of that is completely free. As I encourage you to check it out. But then what we also have is our Pro Research subscription offering, and that's what you'll get a month's free trial to if you go and download that primer that I mentioned earlier. And with the Pro subscription, what we're really trying to do there is to go really deep and get kind of into some of the more practical side of things that professionals are struggling with when thinking about how to implement this technology. And so you'll see that we've got case studies on there. And so that's where we're going to be doing research interviews with vendors and then with clients of those vendors, and actually going beyond that typical kind of case study that you might find on a vendor's website, understanding what were the lessons learned when you put the tool in. How did you get adoption? How did you get senior buy-in maybe to even invest in the technology to begin with? How do you go from pilot to enterprise launch? How do you even get support to do a pilot in the first place? Some of those kind of questions that are actually very tactical around getting some of these things off the ground. And so we'll be building out case studies around all of those. And then what we'll be doing is wrapping that up into monthly reports that summarize all of our findings and running events, which we're calling Masterclasses. This is a kind of taster of that format, whereby we'll then be bringing individuals from those vendors, the practitioners together to share their stories, to do smaller roundtable discussions as well, and kind of get deep into this topic. And so all of that is then included in that £99 a month pro service. And so you can see kind of a little bit of how this works. Every month we start with a specific topic. So at the moment, the one we're looking at in June is around candidate assessment, candidate selection. We'll go out to the different vendors that we know that are in the space. We'll talk to them. We'll talk to their clients. We'll wrap it all together into those case studies that feed into the directory. The monthly research report will be available as well. And then when we run the masterclasses that I talked about, we'll be filming that content as well. And so if you can't come to the masterclass, well, those videos will also feed back into the directory. So over time, that library is going to build and build. So if there's a particular vendor that you're interested in, let's say you go and look up HireVue, for example, over time, what you'll see in there is case studies that we've written and then actual videos of presentations that have been done either by practitioners or by the vendor themselves. And so it becomes a very rich resource of information on this topic. And then this is the roadmap that we're looking at as we go through the next kind of 12 months or so. Some of this, will change as we go through, but this is kind of where we're shooting for at the moment. So you can see I talked about candidate selection there. I've mentioned the primer that will be coming out tomorrow. And then you can see some of the topics we're focusing on as we go through the year. And the idea with this is that we're not saying, okay, we're going to be looking at video interviewing or chatbots. We're not looking at the technology. We're starting with the problem, right? I feel like there's a problem that we have around our recruitment process or our candidate selection process, and maybe technology can help us with that. Well, let's look at all the different types of technology that have AI in them that might support you with that. So we're looking at it very much from the specific use case or problem, and we'll be working through all these as we go through the year. Okay, so I've mentioned the primer already. The link is on the screen to go and get that, and we'll be releasing that tomorrow. What I wanted to do today was just to give you a couple of insights from that primer, just to kind of tee up the conversation here today. And so we've been very lucky. We've got Josh Bursin, who I know many of you will be familiar with, founded Bursin by Deloitte, and has been doing great research in the HR space for many years. He wrote the foreword for us for the primer. And I pulled this quote out, which says, as AI systems in HR get smarter, more proven and more focused on specific problems, I believe we will see dramatic improvements in productivity, performance, and employee well-being. We just have to be patient, vigilant, and willing to invest. And I think what's interesting about that is I'll talk you through some of the surveys and research that we've been looking at. And what we see at the moment is a huge appetite for this space, a huge interest in the kind of hype, if you like, around AI. Is this something that can really, does it work? Is it something that's going to help HR? But there's also a huge gap between that hype and some of that kind of myth, if you like, and the reality of people that have successfully implemented technologies and actually the maturity of some of the tools that are out there. And that's the gap that we're kind of most interested in, really, is helping people understand that and figure that out. And so there was a survey that HR.com ran, and it was around this space. And the first question was around chatbots. And 73% of people agreed that chatbots would be an important interface for employees to get real-time answers. So I think people get the notion of it, right? That's great. Humans can't scale, especially from a recruitment perspective. So the idea of a chatbot being able to do that, brilliant, right? I think people generally feel very comfortable with that as a concept. But then we found, well, but do you think that AI is going to be used for HR in your workplace in 5 years' time? Or the survey was done last year in 2022. And 39% felt that that would be the case. So you can see still relatively high, but a bit of a dropout there. But only 8% strongly agreed that they were knowledgeable in any way in the area of AI. And so you have this massive kind of cliff, if you like, from, yeah, this sounds really cool and I could see the potential, to I actually feel comfortable with the information that I have to make decisions around whether we should use this or not and how to use it and how to make that decision. And it's really that problem statement that most interests us, that we're trying to solve, is how do we really understand that vendor landscape for you all? How do we understand what HR professionals need to know? And how do we kind of work as a broker between those two groups? So we ran our own short survey recently as the run-up to doing this primer. And we wanted to know what was it that was concerning people around implementing AI. And you can see top of the list there is cost and budget constraints, right? And I think some of this is perception and some of it is reality. You know, some of these tools are actually relatively cheap if you compare them obviously to an entire HR management system. But at the same time, it's maybe money that we don't have, right? Or it's money that we need to carve out from somewhere else. And a lot of the tools are very much focused on point solutions. So if you're getting one tool for this, one tool for that, then over time, then obviously that cost can be quite significant. And so cost and budget constraints came out top, but then technical expertise came out second. And again, this is part of the issue around how do we upskill HR? How do we understand what it is that we're trying to solve, and how can we get people to that place? And then you'll see other things there around the technology not being ready. Will it get the right return on investment, which links back to cost? And then ethical concerns as well. And so all of this is an education piece that obviously we're really keen on helping to try and solve. However, we did find that 81.5% of the HR professionals that we surveyed have either implemented or are experimenting, testing, playing with AI for at least one HR use case. So again, we're starting to see traction. We're starting to see people starting to play with this, but people are not at full enterprise stage in many cases. And what you can see on this slide is that, not surprisingly, some of the main areas that people are working on this is around the recruitment space, and then also people analytics. And so, you know, there are many tools that maybe have natural language processing in them, or there's some kind of screening technology getting used. And that, you know, that counts towards that 80% or 81.5%. And so I think in terms of people using multiple platforms and really going deep on the technology, we've still got quite a long way to go. But what you can see on the right-hand side here is kind of where the appetite is going for the next thing that people are looking at. And so you can see that chatbot kind of piece coming in around HR management operations, employee engagement, and recruitment still as well as areas that people are looking to next. But then down the bottom, not surprisingly, when you look at the vendor landscape, not a lot of interest going on around things like total rewards, health and safety, and so potentially, you know, that's an area that we could see growing in the future. So what we tried to do is to condense down the 300 plus different vendors that we have in our directory into something that, first of all, could fit on a page, but also was maybe more realistic around actually which are the platforms that we're seeing that are getting traction, you know, where we're seeing clients kind of moving past pilot stage with them. We're seeing the vendors themselves moving past just one or two early adopters and kind of getting traction in the marketplace. And so we've created just this little market landscape here where you can start to see by category some of the main vendors that we're seeing getting impact across the world in this space. And you'll see again, you know, not surprisingly, a huge number in the recruitment side of things, and then some of the other areas are slightly lighter. But this was our attempt to take that 300 and kind of really look at those that are starting to gain traction. And again, this is all obviously in the primer. Okay, last slide from me. So the other thing I wanted to just tee up is that we are going to be running these masterclasses on a regular basis. Obviously, this is just a little taster session. There'll be almost full-day events. And the first one that we're doing is on July the 18th. And as I said, the research that we're focusing on this month is all around candidate assessment, candidate selection. And so that's what the masterclass will be focused on, and it'll be on July 18th. So a date to mark in your diary. As I mentioned, if you download the primer or subscribe to download the primer, then you would get to come along to this for free, but it's normally £199. So we'll be running these in the future anyway. Please keep an eye on LinkedIn and Twitter and things to learn about those as we go through. All right, so that's it from me. I'm going to hand over to Megan now, who's going to walk through briefly some of the work that we were doing around the space of coaching. All right, thank you.
Oh, but I will take the clicker.
There you go.
And stay away from that. Hi everyone, I'm Megan. So I help Ian by doing the research where I actually talk to the vendors and map out the landscape. This is going to be a very high overview. If you want to get down deep into the topic, feel free to buy me a bottle of wine. I spill my guts quickly. So coaching. We don't always associate something that we do one-on-one with another human with technology. But we see from thinkers like Christian that this seems to be the future. Great book, by the way. As HR practitioners, we know a lot about the benefits of coaching, those coaching conversations, how they help us, they can improve productivity. We also see through CIPD research that this is an area that businesses are typically investing in. And we also know that L&D is also looking at more technology. However, we also know the common problems associated with things like one-on-one coaching. It's a lot of time, money, and it's unable to scale it to a full business. It's normally stuck to a few executives. Does this mean that this is a space that AI can help in? So this is why we decided to look into this space, because it looked like a really interesting landscape. And I found that there was two ways that you could divide out the technology. One that supported human interaction, so a human-based coaching, and one where the coaching actually happened with the technology in some way. Originally, there was about 24 or so products that I found. A lot of them end up kind of being stripped away because they either didn't actually use AI technology, or on the other hand, they claim coaching, but we go with the International Standard Organization's definitions, and they didn't actually fit that coaching definition, so it was more of a mentoring or a training. So these ones, some of them may be a bit of a stretch, but we could argue that they fit into this landscape. And now I'll take you through a couple of the products. The first one I'm going to start with is Pocket Confident. This is one where they guide a coaching conversation using a chatbot. Like most coaching situations, it doesn't actually give any advice, but it does lead you through that conversation in about half an hour. And it's designed to start building, it's a French company, they call it posturing. So to start for people to think in that coaching mindset. So when they go to work, instead of just having that conversation with the technology, they start having that conversation with each other and start developing that mindset and then that culture of coaching. As I said, it doesn't actually provide advice. However, what I think is really unique about this, and where the AI technology also comes in a really unique way, is that though the conversations are completely confidential, they're able to pull out topics. So as a manager, you're able to monitor a dashboard and see what people are talking about, what goals they're setting, and what actions they're taking. So it still gives you that overview. Now I'm going to take you through 3 products that use the technology to link employees with live coaches. I'm going to take you through 2 of them, and then we'll have a vendor describe the third one, that use the technology to help link people with coaches. So the first one here, BetterUp, they use a recommendation engine to help connect employees with coaches. In this case study, one HR manager was able to connect over 200 managers in 30 different countries, beating out time differences, cultural barriers, and language barriers, and connecting them with coaches through the platform. I think the testament to this one, it was recommendations from managers to other managers that kept the program going and kept involvement high. So they found it very successful and really good value for their investment. This product I think is really cool personally. So we all have heart rate monitors on our wrist. So that's like a really simple way to take your heart rate. A more complex way would be like an ECG, which you'd have in an ambulance. So they use one that's kind of in the middle of the two, and they put it on you for 3 days. In that time, they develop a stress report. So while you're at home, when you're at work, in meetings, and from that you get an individualized report about where your stressors are. And from that, they're able to connect you with the type of coach you need to help you deal with your stress. So for BMW, this meant their head office is obviously in Germany. They have a very health-conscious culture, and they wanted other cultures. I think it was the Americans that they really wanted on board. They're not as healthy. I'm Canadian, so I'm allowed to make fun of them. But so this was a way to give individualized reports. And if you think about to BMW, a highly engineering culture. So people want very factual information. So it was able to give them that factual information about themselves to help connect them with their coaches then and make the improvements that they need for themselves. And now I'm going to pass it on to Adrian, who is going to take you through his product and how they use technology to match their employees with the coaching that they need. So Adrian. Sorry. Thanks. Bad habits.
Hello. Yay. How are you guys? How many of you here are HR professionals and how many of you are managers? HR professionals? Cool. And managers? Okay, cool. So today I wanted to take a little bit of time. I'm going to talk about how our technology helps employees drive success within the organization, how it helps improve employee engagement, and there we go. But first I wanted to talk a little bit about what is one of the most human and less technological aspects of companies, and that is the relationship between managers and their direct reports. We're kind of seeing that the traditional middle management functions are being taken over by a lot of SaaS products. A lot of products are making it easier for project management. Companies like Asana are making it easy for team members to collaborate on a project, see what objectives they're after, and organize tasks. We're seeing that more and more tools like Lattice are helping companies set goals and help with cascading goals and OKRs, make sure that each employee knows what they're working on and why it matters for the company. We're also seeing that tools like Slack, Workplace, HipChat are making it easier for employees to contact anyone inside of the company and start having a dialogue and collaborate. That is taking over a lot of the functions that middle managers used to hold. So that leaves us with the two other functions that they have, which is their operational role. Some of them still keep some sales process, some customer relationships, still work on product and engineering, which they can do as an individual contributor alongside their teams. And the last part, which is the people aspect of it. How do we help motivate our teams, align them on the common purpose for the company? And this is where I wanted to kind of talk about what companies like Google and Intel are doing around what they call the manager coach. And that is basically a realization that after implementing OKRs throughout their companies and having this culture of goal setting and alignment since the beginning, introducing instant messaging very early on in their culture, they realize that the role of the manager is now focused, and is the future of that role is around this coaching style of relationship, helping employees navigate through problems about their careers, challenges that they're having within their teams, communication challenges that they're having with coworkers. Gallup, this very well-known engagement statistics company, came out with this study in 2016 saying that managers account for 70% of variance in employee engagement. That relationship is super important for building highly engaged teams. And 2 years later, they published this report. Why is employee engagement not moving? And I think here we're seeing that although managers account for a strong part of the variance in how employees behave and are motivated inside of the company, we're still seeing that managers aren't able to really drive that needle up. And today I wanted to talk a little bit about why that is and how technology can help us solve these types of problems. When you look at the process by which each manager has to go in order to improve these types of metrics, it's basically just like a machine does. They gather data by having conversations with their direct reports, by looking at performance information, by tracking different aspects of how they're communicating with each other through the tones that they have in their emails. And based off of that, they run some sort of pattern recognition algorithm in their minds where they think, hey, this person has been very happy and high performance this week. Today they don't seem to be at their best. They don't seem to be as smiling, and that triggers something for them. And the manager thinks, okay, maybe there's something that needs to happen. Maybe there's a coaching conversation that needs to happen. And then they make a decision based off of the data that they have gathered. But what's kind of interesting is that when you look at the type of data points that they're able to get, you have so many categories that have an impact on that performance and how they feel. There's their personal life. There's how they feel inspired by the company. It's depending on the opportunities that they get from outside. There's a lot of different data points. And when we look at the types of quality of data that they get from this pool of information, it's such a small part of people's lives. If you think of all the things that you have going on through your mind every day, the amount that you're willing to share with other people that you trust, like your family, your friends, and then what you're willing to share with your manager, managers have a really hard time getting quality data from their direct reports. It's very difficult for them to understand what's going on through your mind and what your current challenges are. And that is also by design. Managers are your boss. They define your pay. They define your future within the organization. There's a strong conflict of interest between your personal interests and the interests of the company. And this gap is making it harder and harder for managers to be good at driving the right conversations. So, consequence. So from that infrequent and low quality data, we get poor insights, and this is why we have a lot of managers that arrive at the exit interview, and then they realize someone is leaving for something they hadn't noticed, but had been going on for 3 months. And that is one of the most frustrating things for a manager, getting someone that is important in their team leaving for things that they think that they should have seen earlier. And what Sidekick is building and where our technology is here to help is we're here to give managers access to so much more data. And the way that we do that is by being a third-party confidential coach for each employee inside of a team. So not the manager, but their direct reports. We give a safe space for each direct report to share about their current challenges in their career, the types of problems that they're having with coworkers, how they feel about their performance, the purpose of the organization, and how they think about how much they're learning and what types of things they want to be challenged on. Through that process, we do that by combination of surveys. We use AI to figure out what are the most useful questions to ask in a particular situation. And there's always a human behind it. Although we augment our coaches with a lot of information about the individual, allowing us to provide our services for a very cheap price, we're able to drive very powerful conversations between individuals and their managers. Because at the end of every one of these interactions, the goal is always, how do I help the direct reports structure the right conversation with their manager and therefore bring them that all-important data? And I think if we look back at this three-step process, if we are able to bring the right types of information in a timely manner to managers, it's pretty easy for them to make the right decisions. If someone is coming to you with a particular challenge about how they're feeling about the types of challenges they're having in their work, maybe they don't feel challenged enough. If we're able to have that conversation in a safe environment prior to that, help them structure that conversation with actionable insights for managers, then it's not that hard for a manager to make the right decision or refer you to the right type of people or find out what types of projects they could make you work on, find out maybe HR can help with some L&D tools that they've been developing internally. Once we're able to create that dialogue, these types of problems don't last as much. Here are some of the results that we've been having with some of our pilot customers. One of our first customer was Circle Pay, the payment company here in London. In the space of 3 months, individuals rated their managers 62% higher without the manager changing anything about what they do. Managers weren't trained with new leadership resources. They weren't told how to better communicate with their direct reports, give better feedback. But they got these all-important conversations from their direct reports. Finally, they were able to know how to be a good manager for their team. What were they expecting of them? And just by doing that, we were able also to improve how people felt recognized for their efforts by 74%. That is a huge improvement. When we're looking at initiatives to increase employee engagement inside of a company, we're looking at improvements of 5 to 10% if we're able to drive something that's amazing. Here, we're able to do 40% almost in just 3 months in that team. And without having to pay for expensive leadership training for managers, without having to organize an offsite, and just by setting that up in 3 days. Last point I wanted to bring up, and kind of the key message that I wanted to get out, is that although management seems like one of the most human intensive process within your company, it is actually mostly about data. Managers react in the same way that an AI would. They gather a lot of data, they compare it to previous patterns that they've observed. Maybe they've had a previous team that had a certain type of behavior, and then when they don't see their team identify with that behavior, then they react and think, something's wrong here, there's something that can be improved. And then they make decisions. That is exactly the same way that AIs function. There's a lot of talk about costs. AI is a costly topic, but at the end of the day, what is the most costly within our companies is that human component that we're trying to replace. And if you associate all the costs that you are having to spend trying to fix problems that AI can empower you to do for a much cheaper price, this is where there is so much to be changed. We've been testing with some of our customers where we were able to double the amount of direct reports per manager. When you look at the cost that a manager represents for each employee in your company, it's around $3,000. If you take the salary of your manager, plus all the benefits, plus all the training that you need to provide them, plus all the costs associated with employee engagement, etc., you're around $3,000 per employee. So multiply that by the number of employees in your company, and you have the cost and the opportunity that AI represents to improve on those processes. So that was Sidekick. We are going out of beta in September, and we're offering a cool trial price of €9.99 per team per month. And that accounts for unlimited services. What we do is that we're really aligned with your company. We provide unlimited services, unlimited video sessions, unlimited messaging, unlimited analytics, because we're aligned with whatever your team needs. We function in the same way that you would think about a manager. We don't charge you by the hour of work that we do. We charge you for the performance that we're going to get you. And all of our results are guaranteed. We're able to improve those metrics, and we will reimburse you if we're not able to do it. So that was Sidekick, and thank you very much.
Saying, getting back to their managers, and in what form that goes back? Is it collective or is it individual?
So the question was around how do managers get access to the data that we gather with respecting the employee's privacy. So we don't communicate anything that the employee doesn't want to. The employee is the one that manually selects the pieces of information they want to share with their manager. We're all about empowering individuals to manage up. That's a key idea here. The fact that this top-down approach is so hard to do for managers because they're not able to create that sort of trustworthy relationship in order to gather that data. We're here to empower individuals to figure out what the challenges are and how their managers can help them, and then help them structure that conversation. But we do not share any confidential data about that employees don't want to share.
Measuring performance in organizations is actually a really tricky, intangible problem. So how do you validate the predictions that you make, and how do you make sure that you're right?
It's a good question. One of the things that's pretty interesting with employee engagement is that it's such a personal process that there is not actually a metric that you could measure where you could say people are learning X amount of content, therefore they're really challenged, therefore that's going to build engagement. The problem is that it's such a personal process that the only thing that you can really measure is how people perceive the efforts that the company is doing. So if you can give you an example, one of the trials that we run is before every pilot, we measure all the different metrics and how people feel about different subjects. So we might look at how would you rate your relationship with your manager out of 10. And we take that as a baseline, and then we ask those questions throughout the experiment, and then we track the evolution. And that's how we're able to measure the improvements. But you're totally right in saying that it's very hard to find absolute measurements of how good is management inside of a team without asking the people in the team how they feel about it. Because at the end of the day, if the employee doesn't feel, although arguably you can say that the manager is awesome, if the employee doesn't feel like the manager is awesome, then they'll leave. It's not like a rational argument that you can have about that sort of topic. So yeah, it's purely based on employee perception. And I think maybe we'll be able to later on, when we start correlating and putting all that data together, maybe compile it with Salesforce sales data, for example, we could build some correlations, but at the moment it's only on that perception. Thank you.
How do you drive adoption in this? Because you have different demographics who are differently technologically sort of advanced or backward. And if you've got let's say half a managed team on the app and half a managed team who aren't engaging with it, that's actually creating even more work for the manager to run two systems at the same time.
Yep. So we usually get the buy-ins from managers, and in most of the pilots that we've been running, managers push it out onto their teams. One of the things that managers are really excited about when they start using our product is that they're finally getting feedback. It's an opportunity for them. A lot of the ways that people launch is that they send this out before a key one-on-one or a key performance review and say, hey, I'd like you to talk with these guys for an hour so that we can prepare that one-on-one conversation. And that's usually how we like to onboard users, tie it to a key moment in the manager to direct report relationship, trying to enhance it and really have the manager use that as a resource in order to empower those one-on-ones to be even more transparent and communicative. And at the moment, we're able to onboard about 95% of users that are signed up to our service.
Adrian, with the data that you showed, I mean, it's very impressive data, and that's great. But how long are you running those trials for? Because typically, everybody gets very excited at the beginning. There's a massive kind of adoption rate, and then, after 6-8 weeks, people start to peter out. How long are you running those, and where is that data coming from?
Yeah, so the data I showed you is 3 months. 3 months of work. Right now with that company, we've still been running. We're now at 6 months in. There's still high activity on our platform. And what's interesting is that while we were negotiating between the end of the pilot and the enterprise version, we turned the product off for a month and a half. And we basically found that people fell back to kind of like equilibrium position, whereas they would have pushed by our solution to ask more questions, to be more proactive in the relationship with their managers. But once we weren't nudging them and pushing them to talk to their managers and saying, this is important, that this is going to have an impact on how you feel about your work, how happy you're going to be in this company, then it kind of fiddles out because people go back to this passive kind of relationship with their manager, where they're kind of waiting for their manager to come up to them and push them in the right direction. So I don't have a straight answer that can tell you that if you use this for 5 years, it's going to still have the same impact and you're still going to have the same adoption. Our gut feeling is that companies are changing ever so quickly, which means that there's new people inside of teams, there's new managers, there are reorgs, departments, new products that are launched, and all that change makes it that there's enough change in people's lives that there's always a need for crucial conversations to happen.
It really sounds like a really good pulse type of survey solution that you have in place. My question is, what's really AI related about your solution, especially in relation to coaching? You've talked something about selecting the right questions, but once managers have those actionable insights, what's really AI driven about your solution?
Absolutely.
And just before you answer, can you also explain how it works for the coaches? Because I think that's an important bit that may not have come across.
Yeah, so what AI is enabling us to do is basically to offer this type of service that, an executive coach is going to charge between, 500 to 1,000 pounds an hour. That's when you get them in a personal contract for an employee. We're able to offer it at about 1,000 pounds, but for an entire team with about, on average between 5 to 15 sessions a month. And that is all enabled by AI, basically, because we track the types of questions that coaches ask and in what types of situations. We use all that survey data to correlate it with types of questions and results after that question and how the survey was impacted, to basically constantly be learning and empowering coaches to do more with less amount of time. And so at the moment, we're not providing more deeper insights or more profound features thanks to AI. What we're doing is reducing massively the costs that a solution like this would. If we weren't able to have this type of technology, our product would probably be 3 to 4 times more expensive, because it will require a lot of work from coaches. They'd have to follow individuals. They would have to take down notes of what are the guide conversations that are having, share all those notes with different coaches, which was, since we were paying them by the hour, would cost more and more. And that would make a product like this basically unscalable and unable to be used on a large scale. So to answer very bluntly your question, it's a cost question at the moment. It's enabling us to empower coaches to make decisions quicker and more efficiently. I think later on, as we also leverage that data to build deeper insights into how organizations function, we'll be able to use even more to basically map out organizations and give deeper analytics than anyone can basically provide to companies, thanks to the type of quality of data.
Sorry, just on that point, I don't quite understand that. That sounds to me like data analytics. Is the platform actually learning, which is what AI is? That sounds like insight.
Yep, it's learning based on the sessions that it's having. So every time a coach is in a session with an employee, it takes all the data about the past conversations that have been going on, the types of survey points that have been tracked, and based off of that, it's going to pick the right questions to ask at what moment and suggest them to the coach for them to go to the the quickest route to solving the issue with the employee. And so that allows our coaches to be using about 100 different coaches at the same time, whereas before they could probably do 20, 25, because they'd have to keep track of each employee, try and spend the first 30 minutes figuring out the situation of the employee, and all of that is basically working towards that.
Any final questions before we wrap? Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Adrian. Appreciate you answering those questions. So thank you all for coming along this morning. Really appreciate it.